Yeah, I try to make this outside and the wind's sort of blowing too much and whatnot. Yeah. Improvised hillbilly think. How do you do it? Well, first up, you've got to understand structural integrity. If you've ever pulled a radio apart, you'll notice there's little bits like where the screws mount from one side of the casing to the other. And they don't just have like, the good ones don't just have like a bit of plastic stuck up that you can just put the screw into. They've got a bit of plastic stuck up, and then they'll have like four little sort of almost legs sort of going down, like little strips going down each side. Now if they just put that straight up, it'll snap off very easy, but because they've got these little pieces sort of dangling down from all four sides on that little shaft that the screw goes into, that gives it structural integrity. Now if you've got an old radio that's buggered all together, or you got a smashed one or whatever, have a look and you'll see what I mean. You also see it with like steel. If you've got flat steel, you can shake it like shaking a towel. And if you put a bend in it that's like 15-degree angle, it'll be a little bit stronger, but it's primarily still weak. But if you go 90 degrees or sharper, it becomes really seriously strong, like a piece of channel. This is why they make corrugated iron roof sheets instead of just using flat sheet steel, because it gives it strength. And when you understand structural integrity in those sort of terms, you start to understand basic fabrication, like making things. You might call it steel fabrication, is what you may think of it as. That's how I usually think of fabrication, as being steel. But you can understand what makes things strong and what makes them hold their shape, and then you start to look at things in a very different light, and you start to realise that your 4 and 5 gallon square plastic cube water containers can be used for a lot more than that, and IBCs and 44 or 55 gallon drums. You start to realise that, hang on a minute, that 4 gallon steel tin I can get for nothing from a mechanic who's had oil in it, but I can use that for such and such. Or I can get those 4 and 5 gallon square cube drinking containers, and they mightn't be any good for drinking because they've had pesticide, herbicide in them, or sheep drench or whatever, cattle drench in them, but they make a good letterbox, as I have with mine. And you start to realise that when you understand structural strength, you'll know what will hold its shape, what won't. If I cut this piece out, it'll still work. If I cut it out, if I cut the whole front off, it'll collapse. But if I just cut around, and give it a couple of inches around of the sides and leave a few inches of the sides on and then cut the rest out, it'll still hold because it's got those corners on it. And you start to understand a lot of things structurally and realise that there's a whole stack of stuff you don't need to buy to do the job. There's a whole stack of stuff that you, like a hillbilly, may have hoarded up that can do the job fantastically without you having to spend any money, or go and buy it off someone for $2, $5, some, almost diddly squat amount, lemon beer money, and you won't have to spend massive dollars to get something that does the job. One of the big things is, though, hillbillies aren't sort of worried what it looks like. And it's all this paranoia being worried what it looks like. It costs a lot. Let's face it. I've seen letterboxes for $450 each. I'm not joking. As of a few years back, like in 2005, I was in a pretty shonky old job, and I was making $489 a week, and it was a minimum wage sort of job. But you got to realise, like, $450, like, I can go buy a kick-ass big screen TV for that over here. And people spending that on letterboxes? It's just a damn box. Oh yeah, but this... Hillbillies don't worry about that stuff. I don't really give a stuff about that, you know. That's why, on occasion, I mean, I dress alright in these videos, but there's been some times where I've had shirts on in public that, you know, really should have been in the bin, but it doesn't worry me, you know, not really. So that's one of the things you got to understand is structural integrity, and as a result, substitution of other things that are severely cheap. And you start to get a clue by looking at other people's stuff and how they've done it. And if you go into a hillbilly area or in the Appalachians, or spend a bit of time in these sort of areas in the Deep South and Appalachians and that, and real hillbilly sort of areas where, you know, outback Australia and whatnot, you'll see all this stuff. And you'll start to get ideas from that. And secondarily, of course, you know, not worried about the looks and the fashion. You know, we're not some blooming spendaholic 16-year-old daughter of some rich yuppie snob. You know, we just need to get the job done, and we do it with what we have. And the best part of all this is you're living within your means, and even better still, it's money that you didn't have to spend on that, and you can now have that as savings, or spend it on another project, and go ahead and, you know, let's face it, blimmin' that solar fridge system was not cheap. But, you know, when a letterbox costs $450 for a snob's model, and I can get a propane fridge for like $330, $300, like, hello, you know, you're going to get your house set up so much quicker, and it's all the more money that you got to spend, you know, that you have to spend, rather, on other stuff. It's savings. It's when hard times hit, you can pay for gasoline for your generator. You can, you know, do things without skipping bills and having the damn repossessors turn up, having the man from the collection agency knock on the door and say, you haven't paid your propane bill, you know, we need our TV back, or whatever, you know. So, yeah. So that's hillbilly think, you know, and it's born out of necessity, out of being poor, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it anyway, because it's a good way of saving money, which will either allow you to A, have savings, B, build up a whole heap of other stuff that may be useful in the future, like a big stash of food for preppers, or toilet paper, which will be fantastic for trade if there's any economic troubles, or just purely not being up against the wall financially. And yeah, there's nothing better, I think, than having money in your pocket. I'd rather live like a hillbilly, you know, and always have money in my pocket. And that's the way it is with me. So yeah.